Regional Director for the Low Country Region Office for 1890 Extension Program.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. It's a great day down here in Esther, South Carolina. Glad y'all could come up and meet with us and take all this information that we're going to give out today. I'm Lewis Whitesides. I'm the Vice President and Executive Director of 1890 Programs at South Carolina State University. And it's a pleasure for me to be here today. And it's a pleasure to be here because Esther is one of those places. When I started off as an extension agent about 20 years ago, I don't know if you all remember, we used to come down like once a month and work with Mr. J.J. Orr, who was the town administrator at the time, to do small business consultations. So we would come down and work with small businesses and do things like that. And Esther always welcomed us here, as real partners. So I'm really ecstatic to be here again and that sort of thing. I want to commend Mr. Washington and his staff, our Low Country Regional Office, for putting this on. This is a huge problem, especially in our communities. It's a problem that's been plaguing us for years. And this is something that I hope will be able to assist, our great citizens of South Carolina in working through these problems. Now, it's great that they're having this because, as I was sharing with Mr. Hamilton earlier when I came in, that I have a personal problem that just showed its head in my family with this not long ago. I had a grand uncle that just passed away a few weeks ago. And what we found out was it's about 60 acres on my mother's side that has been in the family that was never probated by my great-grandfather. Now, with me being the only one here in South Carolina and everybody else in Detroit and all these places gone, it fell in my lap. So my mother has passed on and that sort of thing. Now, I need to figure out where do we start. So I'm going to be learning just as much as you do, paying attention and being attentive. So thank you, Mr. Washington, for putting this on. This is right on. I didn't know I was going to be in a position to benefit from this as much as I have, but I will. And I'll be taking notes, and I'll be asking some of you all who are presenting some questions specifically to help solve my problems, and I hope you all do the same. So with that, again, I want to thank y'all for participating. I want to thank y'all for participating with us and always being real supporters of the program. And if there's anything that we can do at South Carolina State University 1890 program to assist you, please feel free to let us know. Thank you.
Good morning. I was told I had to get a mic and I had to stay behind the podium. That's something I'm not so used to. I like to move when I talk. But I want to thank each one of you for coming this morning because this problem of land laws is affecting us for a long, long time. And I start extension journey as an extension agent. And what I found out is that early in the journey, I found out we have been losing land rapidly and we are not catching up. So the funny thing is, this week, while Ishmael was preparing for this program, we found out that this program had been done in 1987. And somehow he came across the same agenda that he had in 1987, which is talking about the same thing we will be talking about today. But back then, the minority land, we represent about 14% of the total farmland. And we were talking about then that we're losing land. We need to do something about it. And today, here we are. Guess what? We are less than 1% ownership of land. In 87, we're talking about ownership, and when we have about 14% of the total land. And we're sitting here 2001, talking about the same thing, but now we are less than 1%. But guess what? If we don't get up and do something, and be serious about this issue, that 1% won't even help us no more. Because we need to start doing what we're supposed to do back then. We started with 40 acres and a mule. By that time, we were 97% of the ownership. We are in 2001, less than 1%. If that doesn't ring the bell, I don't know what else can ring the bell. So for all of you that are here today, I'm pleased to see you here. I hope when you leave here, you got all the information you need. We got folks here that will tell us exactly what we need to do. Let's don't take the information home and sit down and come in 2015 talking about the same thing. By that time, we will be less than 0% because we're going down so fast. Like our boss just said it. In 2 weeks, a week ago, he just found out there's a 60 acres somewhere that his great-granddaddy left behind. Now he had to learn the lesson the same way we all have to learn it. But thank you for coming today, and let's make this thing the changing point for us. Let's make something happen this time. I know we can't go back to that 14%, but let's make it more than 1%. Thank you for coming this morning.
Good morning. I'm Ishmael Washington. I'm the Regional Director for the Low Country region for South Carolina State University 1890 Extension Research and Extension Program. You've heard quite a bit from the two previous persons about how serious this is, so I'll just sort of like reiterate the fact that land loss is a very serious problem in our areas. And of course, we've been working at this for a while now, but now because of the fact that it's such a serious problem for us, we decided to put on a regional conference in order to address some of these issues. The cooperative partners, I would like to just mention, are going to be the, I'll call them local government agencies, specifically courthouse representatives or courthouse staff members and so forth is going to do the first portion of this program. Also, our farmers groups. We have several small farm cooperatives. That's a real key issue for us, a key instrument for us to actually get some information over. And they would be, and I'll name them, the Allendale, Hampton, Jasper County Young Farmers Association, the Gullah Farmers Cooperative in Beaufort, South Carolina, and the Farmers Low Country Marketing Cooperative headquartered in Hampton. This promises to be a very educational and productive conference, and we are looking forward to it. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Dr. Whitesides, Mr. Abidjan, Mr. Washington, for the remarks. As Mr. Washington indicated, land ownership and responsibility is a serious issue that we need to be addressed in the Low Country community as well as the South Carolina state as abroad. Also, the 1890 program, we strive on providing services and resources through partnerships. So we have some key individuals that's going to share with you all on this morning some of our collaborative agencies. So first up, we're going to have Miss Elaine Sabb. She's the clerk of court for Allendale County Government. Ms. Sabb?
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It certainly gives me great pleasure to be one of your presentations today. Thanks to Mr. Washington along with his staff for the invite. My name is Elaine Sabb. I'm the Allendale County Clerk of Court along with one of my colleagues. He's here, our probate judge, Mr. Keith Smith. Want to talk to you a little bit today about property, the different types of deeds, mortgages, and how important it is to have those things prepared prior to any. Unfortunately, we are going to have to leave this world one day. But as a property owner, you need to know that there are some things that you can put in place to protect where your property ends up or who it ends up with. The first thing I want to talk to you about is, how many of you guys ever heard of something as reserving a life estate? You did? Okay, so that's a good thing. Reserving a life estate means that if you own property, you can actually have a deed prepared reserving a life estate, which means that Elaine Sabb, the property will actually stay in my name while I'm living. Then upon my death, I have already stipulated who I want to have my property, whether it be my husband, my children, or anything. One thing I really want to share with you, if you have property and you have children and you're married, you have your spouse. Unfortunately, if you do not have your property stipulated where you're reserving a life estate or you doing a right of survivorship. A right of survivorship means that upon your death or your husband's death, it automatically goes to the survivor. That is very important, because if you don't, when you have to go through probate to establish, to get that property out of the deceased name, half of that property goes. And as husband and wife, a long time ago, we used to say that if the property is not in their name, then they don't have ownership to it. That's not so. The property can actually just be in my name, but if I'm married, that property is half of that property automatic goes to my husband upon my death. But if I want my husband to just have complete control of it, then we should do a right of survivorship, or we should do a life estate. But then again, if not, then I have children. Half of my half is going to go to my children. The other half is going to go to my husband. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if something happened to my husband, God forbid, I want to be the sole control of my property, because I've worked hard for it. I want my kids to have it, but upon my death, not them have a say-so on it while I'm still living. And maybe some of you guys do, and that's fine too. But you need to know the difference, and you need to know what you need to do to put those things in place. I would suggest one day that you set an appointment with your probate judge or set an appointment with your assessor and go in and sit down and talk about those different things, and especially the probate judge, because that's a little bit more in his field. But talk with them so you can get those things situated, because you do have choices, but you need to know what you want to do and the choice that you need to do and the choice that you need to make in order to make those things happen. A little bit more I want to talk to you about is wills. It's very important if you have property or land or money or anything else, do a will so you can allocate where you want your property to go and who you want it to go to again. And I keep saying property because that's what we're here today to talk about, land and property. So just make sure that it's very important. But I will tell you, a deed take precedence to a will, which means if I do a deed and deed my property to my children, and then I decide to do a will and I decide to will that same property to my niece, then my husband is going to have complete ownership of that property, because a deed take precedence to a will. Because if I have already deeded it out to someone else, then it's not mine to will to someone else. Does that make sense? Okay. It's important to check to make sure that you don't have any mortgage on your property. And you know whether you have a mortgage or not, because you know if you're making a payment or not. But it's very important to make sure, if you're not still making payments on your property, check in the clerk of court's office to make sure that that mortgage company has filed a satisfaction. Because a satisfaction is just what it says. There's a document that stamps on there that this mortgage was satisfied such and such date. But that's very important, because if that mortgage company did not file that satisfaction in the clerk of court's office, then say years down the road you decide you want to refinance that, or you decide you want to borrow some money against the property, then you're not going to get a clear title, because a title researcher would have to come in to search to make sure that that mortgage was satisfied, that title is clear, or that deed is clear. So please just check, just take a day. My advice to you is just take a day, one day, to go into the clerk of court's office if you're no longer paying for your property, to say, you know, I just want to make sure that a satisfaction was filed on my property. That is very important. And power of attorney. This is the last thing I'll have to talk about. But it's very important to have a power of attorney filed. And you don't necessarily have, we don't know where sickness is around the corner for any of us. But when I can tell you this, if you get sick and you go into the hospital, the first thing the hospital is going to ask, is there a power of attorney filed? A power of attorney gives that individual, and you can just do a medical power of attorney, or you can do a general power of attorney, or you can do both. A general power of attorney is that when that individual has the say-so or has the authority to go in and sign documents on your behalf, make a decision on your behalf. A medical power of attorney gives that individual the authority to make any medical decisions on your behalf. It is very important. My recommendation to you guys are have one drawn up. You don't have to have it filed. It's not valid unless it's filed and recorded in the clerk of court's office. I suggest you have one done and have it in a place where other people know where it is. And that way, if something happens and there's a need that you need to have that document filed, all they have to do is just go take it to the clerk of court and have that document recorded. That's what makes it valid. Again, and it's not even a bad thing to even have one recorded, you know, because we never know if situations are right around the corner. We never know. And I'll tell you about a little incident that happened to me and my family. My brother, he got COVID and got really sick, and I talked to them about doing the power of attorneys, doing the right of survivorship, and they did. So when he got sick, you know, he got better, but his wife got really, really sick, definitely sick, shortly after he did. But they had the power of attorneys recorded and all of that. Never even knew that they were going to need it. But as soon as she got to the hospital, the first thing they asked for was the power of attorney. They had it recorded. He was able to provide it to him. She died within a week and a half later. So, you know, we never know, but and he was the sickest, but he's still here, you know, thank God. But again, those are situations where we never know what may happen. So in a situation like that, that is my advice to you guys. Talk to someone until you can get a little bit more information about them, and just take the time to have those documents prepared. Are there any questions for me? Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for inviting me here. I'd like to remind everyone that as an elected official, you, the people, elected us to serve you. So you should feel confident to come to our office, make an appointment to come and see us, and ask questions so that we can help you, because that's what we were elected to do, to serve you. So take confidence in the people you elected and ask them to come and help. We are more than willing to help you. I'm Jennifer Humans, and I serve as the Hampton County Treasurer. Now, South Carolina has 46 counties, and we don't all do things the same way. Some counties, the treasurer also serves as the tax collector, but in Hampton County specifically, I serve only as the treasurer, and that means I handle current real estate property notices only. Anyone who doesn't pay within that current window, and I'll explain to you what that is, all those unpaid notices at that time, I turn over to our delinquent tax collector, Mrs. Delia Smith, and she'll be speaking with you shortly. The current window is from the time the notices are issued until March 16th or 17th, thereabout, depending on whether the last day falls on a weekday or on a weekend. Our county auditor, who creates our bills, did an excellent job of making sure all of the information you need is on your bill. And that includes all of the penalty dates so that you are aware how much you have to pay, when you have to pay it. So if you just read your bill, which tells you, like I said, everything you need to know, you won't miss your window of opportunity to keep your payments current. The bills are based on whoever is the owner of the property on December 31st of the prior year. So it's very important that you keep your information updated. In the assessor's office is where you have to have your name or whoever the correct owner is on the property. When you come to the treasurer's office to pay, we don't know what name your property is in. You have to tell us. It's most easy for us to process your payment if you have your bill with you. But if you don't, please make sure the assessor and the auditor has your name spelled correctly. We will look up your name, but if you have a unique name, you may have to spell it for us, and please be willing to do that. There are penalty dates in the current window. The first one is January 16th. You need to pay by that date to pay without penalty. So whatever's on your bill, and again, the bill is very clear. It's printed very large, this amount by this date. If you don't make the first penalty date, the second date is here, what that penalty is. Again, it's very clear, and if you don't pay by March 16th, that is when your property is then, well, your taxes are considered delinquent. And then a whole nother process starts. Again, our delinquent tax collector would explain that to you. Again, here in Hampton County, I deal with current taxes only. So if you've fallen behind, then you work with the delinquent tax collector to become current again. We're here for you. We're more than happy and willing to serve you. Again, like the clerk of court said, it all starts with, do you have a will? Is the deed in your name? Be willing to not think of this as planning for your death. Think of it as planning to keep your family whole and in peace and your wishes known before you leave. And we're here to serve you in any way we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sabb and Ms. Yeomans. We're going to keep the program moving. At this time, we're going to call to the front Ms. Teresa Williams. She's representing Hampton County Government.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I told I've been doing these across the state, helping with Mr. Washington and other counties or whatever for a number of years. But Mr. Washington wanted me to say a few things about our assessor's office. I don't mind doing that. I've been working for the county for 40 years, so sort of a roundabout way. But with the land situation, the assessor handles your land and buildings. That comes from the assessor's office. All real estate is handled through your assessor's office to put on the books, where taxes can be prepared through the auditor's office for taxation every year. Your deeds some of the deeds are in their file folders there in the county, and if it's not in there, then you're welcome to go to clerk of court office and get copies. Our assessor's office put on all they have the property on their rolls for manufacturing, but our manufactured properties is taxed through the state of South Carolina Department of Revenue. Okay, is that? But if you need to know anything about your land, your plaques, a copy of the area photograph or anything, go to your assessor's office, okay? And ours is located in the BT Deloitte building in Hampton. Each county has one, so just check in there. Now, some of the former records are the older records back 1900. They don't have all the deeds in their file records, but they're trying to bring everything up to date. So if they don't have it, you can still go to clerk of court and do a little title searching and find it. But it's always a pleasure to talk to people about what I do, how I do it. But I'm just a servant for the people of not only Hampton County, the state of South Carolina. As I foresaid, I was elected in 1996, started off in office July 1 of 1997, but I worked in the office since February of 81. But my office, the one I'm in charge of, we prepare all the taxes in the county. Real estate, vehicles, boats, motors, and any supplements for people bringing in or taking their mobile homes out of the county. Anything to do with a billing process is handled through the auditor's office, okay? We also do homestead exemption when you get of age, if you on disability. But a lot of people, they don't understand that our taxation is based on December 31 of the previous year. We had to have a cutoff time. And the taxes is based on December 31 of the previous year. So for instance, the bills that will go out in October or September of 2021 is based on December 31 of 2020. And on my notices that I had redesigned in 96 to show where each dime goes, it has it printed on the bottom as taxable property as of December 31 of the previous year on all of them. We also process business personal for the law offices, anything that provides a service in your county. Other than that, it's taxable by the state of South Carolina. This year, there was a change in the law. We had county business personal forms that we sent out every year around January, but now we all using the same form, the state as well as the county. So if you have a business or anything, you need to file what we call a PT 100 form. So if you don't have one of the ones from our office, you can pull it off of the state website. But anytime you need a copy of a form or anything, you're welcome to stop by the auditor's office and get it. We have it. We also, if you know that the law changed last year with our boats and motors, they are now being billed just like a vehicle starting January 1 of this year. So whatever month that you bought your boat or your motor, be when time to pay your $10 fee each year. If you're on that list for the month of February or March, it's just like our vehicles. We get a listing, we put on it the assessments that's not there, most of them are there anymore, and you get something to remind you that your boat taxes is due for that month. I did touch a little bit on the homestead, but I wanted to tell you something about the homestead I didn't fail to mention, is that your homestead exemption is not only based on age 65. Usually you're going into year 66 before you get homestead exemption. If you're on total and permanent disability, you also can be exempt. If you're a veteran, 100% disabled, you'll be exempt. The form can be sent to the state, and they'll do your exemption for your home and 2 vehicles, okay? So I have a public research room that's in the BT Deloitte building, and it has all tax files from 1886 up until 2020 in there. I had the pleasure of getting some funds back in the day, and I had the tax books archived. out of Columbia. So if a tornado or something come through and take down the county office with the books in the research room, they're in Columbia from 1886 to 1960, and people need to know that. I just didn't have the time to try to get another grant to bring it. They allow you every 20 years to bring it up to date, but it's good to have a backup, because if these buildings isn't secure and act of God coming in process, it's hard to recapture something that's not there, okay? Also with that, if something catastrophic should happen, inside the vault in that room is a vault, a heavy vault. They had to bring it in on a machine in order to get it in there. But in there is the old-time microfiche films that someone can always get it and read back if you need it. Everything else might go down, but that vault will be sitting there with those files in it. I guess a lot of you know how vehicles work. They're built by law, supposed to be out 45 days before the due date, but you have to appeal your mileage every year, in order to get it reduced. The reason for that is this. Our notices is no longer printed locally in the county for us to know what your value of did you come in last year for high mileage, because there's no way to have that put on your bills, okay? So every year, you're gonna have to come back and appeal the assessment on your vehicle within that month. They come out early, so you don't have to pay when you appeal, but you need to pay to appeal your taxes by the due date. At one time, we had a long form, but everything now is on your tax notice. So if you wanna appeal your tax for high mileage, it's on your tax notice. Fill out that bottom portion. If you don't wanna come in, mail it in to us, we'll do it and send it back to you, if you have time. The vehicles is a big thing. They're taxable now. They got different ratios. Motorhomes and campers, if they have the living in facilities and you claim it as your second home, you can get it at 6% ratio, and that's statewide. The vehicles, if their gross weight is over 26,000 pounds, you don't have to pay tax. You pay it through the state on the end of the year whenever you file your paper with the state. But we do send a reminder to let you know that your tag is due. This is a homestead exemption brochure that I give to a lot of taxpayers when they come in. The reason why I give it to them, because it stays in here what you can, what age you have to be, and it tells what tax year that you're being taxed for. Also, you can sign up and do a one-time sign up now if you're with opening a business with South Carolina Boss, and it'll go to your information will be spread among all the entities. So things has changed. It's computerized, whereas we had to do a lot of work and send it back to Spartanburg. Now it's all done local in the office. They upload our files. They send us files through FileZilla every month, and we do what we need to do and send it back. And they print the notices and send them out from Spartanburg or Columbia. I don't want to take up everybody's time here. I have the telephone number to my office is 803-914-2114. Feel free anytime that you got a question or want to know something, stop by the auditor's office. Come June 30th of this year, after 40 years and about 4 months, I will be fully retiring. And I want you to know, this is LaTanya Williams. She's our newly elect auditor. I felt it was fitting to let her come where the people will know who she is. I thank you all this morning for coming. Mr. Washington, thank you so much for the invite. We've been doing this about 20 years, is it, or longer? So I have my board. I usually set the board up where people can pull brochures or get what they want. But like I say, if you can't get me direct or don't know how to get me, call Mr. Washington. Don't worry, I think everybody in the county know where to find me at. Thank y'all so much, and thanks for the invite.
Good morning. I'm Delia Smith, the Hampton County Tax Collector, and our office, after the taxes become delinquent on March the 17th, it comes over to the delinquent tax office. We send our first notice out by April the 30th, letting you know that your taxes are now delinquent, and you make your payments to the delinquent tax collector. And on about the end of June, we send out our certified restricted notices. These are the ones that you need to pick up from the post office when they come out. And if you don't pick them up, they're returned to our office. And that's when you see those little orange signs going up on people's property. And most people don't like to see those little orange signs, but then you don't pick up your tax notice, so then you're going to get the orange sign posted on your property, mobile homes, and your businesses, the buildings, that if you don't pay the taxes, then you're going to receive those notices. So after that, we and the State Department requires that we go out and post your property. And one way to avoid getting those signs is to, if you moved or changed post office boxes, please let us know that you have changed your address, because we have no way of knowing that your address was changed. We have phone calls coming in sometime that I didn't receive my tax bill, I moved 15 years ago, and I didn't get a bill. And so I'm saying, like, you just looking for a tax bill after 15 years? So it's a possibility that you don't own that property anymore. The state of South Carolina requires the tax collectors to advertise the taxpayers' names and their property in the paper prior to the tax sale. Let me go back. You have until September 1st to pay your taxes before having them advertised in the paper. And after, on August the 30th, you can no longer pay with a check. You have to have cash, cashier's check, or money order. We cannot accept personal checks after August the 30th. So after September, then you know that there's a possibility that your name will be in the paper, so you need to come in and pay your taxes. After that, we start preparing for the tax sale. And the tax sale, the property is advertised 3 weeks prior to your tax sale. And all this must be done at that time. And when we do the advertising, sometimes the landowners have several acres of property. And if you don't request from the assessor's office to just take out enough acreage for you to satisfy the taxes, then all your property is going to go at the tax sale. After the sale, you have a year and a day to redeem your property. You have increments that the interest that's due on the property. The first is 3% from the first month to the third month. From the 4th to the 6th month is 6%. From the 7th to the 9th month is 9%. From the 10th through the 12th month is 12%. However, in every redemption period, the amount of interest due should not exceed the opening bid. So if you are a bidder and you bid the tax up real high, but the opening bid was a low bid, that's the most money you can get from that tax sale. You can't go any higher than what the opening bid is for your interest. And in the latter part of 2020, the governor signed a bill extending the redemption period for the 2019 sale. And your interest still accrues on that property. It started over in January of this year, where you already completed the 2019 redemption period and it's starting over for you, but you have to pay, the interest starts all over again. So you got an extension, but you're still paying the interest on the property. It starts back over at 3%, 6%, 9%, and 12%. So the taxpayers need to be aware that even though you have an extended amount of time to pay your taxes, you have to pay more money. So I just thank everyone for having me here this morning, And if you have any questions, you can call my office at 803-914-2125. Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Well, good morning. That's what everybody else said, so good morning. I'm Keith Smith. I'm the probate judge in Allendale. I was asked to come over and talk a little bit about land going through probate. Well, probate judge wears a lot of hats, and we have a lot of things that go through our office. But the most important thing to me is how we handled our land, your land. And the reason I say our land is I own land. I've farmed most of my life, and I cherish our land and are proud of just the low country land and what we have and what a treasure it is. So I'm going to kind of talk about the best way to be responsible and take care of that land. It's a blessing to have land in your name or family's name, because we know they don't make any more and you just can't go to Walmart and buy land. So let's start off with, like Ms. Sabb said, there's several ways that you can protect your land and make sure it goes where you want it to go. She talked about right of survivorship. She talked about life estates, and those are some of the best tools to take care of your land to start with. But then if that's not a possibility or lands hadn't been done that way, then the will is the next major process you need to do. You need to have a will. You need to state in that will where you want your land, who you want to receive your land, and other properties. And by doing that, that eliminates a lot of laws being put in place. I kind of put it like this. If you want to control where your property goes, you have to do it yourself. Do it with a will, do it with a deed. If not, the state of South Carolina is going to tell the probate how to move your property to the next generation. I don't want the state telling me where I'm going to put my land or who I'm going to give it to. I want to do it. So if you take that attitude and that kind of ownership of your land and your real estate or personal property, then it'll flow through probate, through a will, without any problems. You name your personal representative who's going to take care of getting that land through probate, paying your bills, and making sure that land is preserved the way you want it preserved. Now, we get to land that has not been taken care of through the years. Great-grandmother dies, never probated a will, it keeps moving down, and it becomes heir property. We want to avoid that. The way to stop that from happening is to start right now. Go home, check your deeds, make sure they're clear like the clerk said, and start your process of a will or deed to get your land where it needs to be. If you are involved in heir property, there's a group that's going to speak after me that will help you get this land to where it's back in ownership, to where it can keep moving along. It's very important. A will. Do a will. And it's very important that when someone dies in your family and you're the next of kin, or you have a connection to that person, probate. Go to probate and let's get the property taken care of and move to the next generation properly, to where these folks over here with the protection of heir property and trying to keep that and save that property for you won't have a job. And that's what we want. We want all the land to be in your control and not divided amongst so many people that the land is not worth anything. It can't be sold, you can't cut timber, you can't even put a home on it. That's what we want to get away, because once that land gets that way, usually taxes don't get paid, it's sold on the courthouse steps, or some developer comes in and takes family land. Very important. Do a will. Make sure that you either do a will or deed and protect your property. And I want to tell you here, your probate judge in the courthouse is your best friend. You go to that judge, you get them to assist you or help you, and when somebody dies, don't fear the probate judge. He's there to help you transfer and move that property to where it belongs in your family, to the heirs or people you want it to have. I could go on and on about what you got to do and what timing is involved and all that, but that's not important. The important thing is right now, protect your land. Go ahead and make a will. If you got a grandmother that doesn't have a will, get her to make a will. Right on down the line so we can get this property in y'all's hands to where you don't lose it. And once it gets out of your hands, there's no way to get it back. Okay? What about questions? Does anybody have a question?
Yes, sir. So, we have a will, and that will transfers that land to a trust. How does that work?
Okay. A trust is a different instrument than a will. You can have a trust to handle anything you have. So a trust is, what you do with a trust is you have your land go in a trust. That trust is separate from the will, and it is set up by you to where you say what that land's to be used for, who's going to be the trustee and control that land, and stipulate everything it can be done. And in the end of that trust, there's how the land ends up the next round. In other words, you can control a lot more with what happens with a trust. But that's a separate instrument. You can put your land in a trust before the will, and it has nothing to do with probate because it's already owned by that trust. The trust is just like it's an instrument to hold that land and our monies or whatever, and controlled by the rules that you set up in that trust. It can get real complicated, but yet you can still make it simple. So.
One last question. If there is land held in a business, and let's say that business is a partnership of some sort, does that go through probate court, or is that a separate?
If any partner of that business or whatever dies, their share in that business will go through probate. If they own part of that business, it will have to go through probate, and then it will be dispersed according to the will or by South Carolina intestate law. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What is acceptable as a will? You know,
Okay.
It's like if you get grandmama to just write on a piece of
Okay,
paper and sign it.
here's what makes a valid will.
Okay.
Has to have a date on it, dated. It has to be signed, of course, by the person making the will. They have to sign it. You have to have 2 witnesses that have no connection with the person signing or going to receive anything from that will, and preferably a notary. We can notarize all those signatures. Doesn't have a notary, if it's good and solid and all the witnesses are where you can go get those witnesses. If somebody contests that, then you can still make it a valid will. It just takes a lot more if somebody contests it. I've seen them written on a grocery bag. And people say, well, that's a deathbed will. That's the most strongest will out there. Because when somebody's facing death and they write a will, they're pretty sincere. That will, and then they have the proper witnesses and the date, and they were in their right mind. And that's one reason for the witnesses. The witnesses can't have any connection with the person writing the will or somebody that's going to receive something in that will. That's why it's important to do it as much in a public place, a lawyer, or somewhere. A lot of people have them done in the hospital with a social worker or different things like that. But that's what makes the valid will. Witnesses, a date, it's got to be dated. And of course, the person writing the will's name has to be in it, and they have to sign it.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes?
If the property, someone dies and the property has a mortgage on it, how does that work?
Okay.
Satisfying the mortgage that is being passed?
Okay. If you got a piece of property with a mortgage on it, the mortgage is strictly an attachment to the property. The property will flow through the estate and go to the proper heir or whoever it was willed to, but the mortgage follows it. Mortgage never leaves the land until it's satisfied. So in other words, you can still, and that sometimes worries people, but if it's got a mortgage, it's still property, it's still real, it still belongs to that person. They've just got an agreement to pay this mortgage. They put the mortgage on it to protect the company that lent them the money. So, say you inherited a piece of property or whatever that had a mortgage on it. The mortgage company will work with you because they want the money. They don't want the property. And then a lot of times you can take those mortgages over, renegotiate them, refinance them, different things. And sometimes they'll release it for less money, not to have to go through their legal side to take over the land. So don't be scared of a mortgage on a piece of land that's going through probate. First of all, probate will be there to help you and protect you and make sure that that mortgage company does the right thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Feel free to call anytime. Oh, got one.
You refer to a weight and be on a paper bag or anything of that nature. Is he a specific structure to it?
It's what now?
Is he a specific format that the will has to be in, or you can write anything?
You could write it in anything. We just suggest that you do the right format. The best thing to do is go to a lawyer. It's the best money you'll ever spend to get the will drawn up, because there's certain things and wording in a nice drawn up, professionally drawn up will that gives the personal representative a lot of leeway and a lot of things they can do to make the process smoother. You follow me? Just don't go home and write a will. In other words, do that, but take the time to do it right. There's nothing wrong with the wills that you can get all online, and you can get it printed out and adjust it to what you want, but still, to do it right, take the time. And there's different legal services that'll help you do a will. Social services got people that'll help, but just do a will, okay? And the reason I talked about that simple little deathbed will, because it is valid, but that's not the way to do business. That's a last minute deal. If you own land, your responsibility, get that will, get it right, or either get the land deeded with a right of survivorship or life estate. Okay? Any questions? Benny, you don't have a question? We buy and swap goats and cows, and I love the land, and we as probate judges want y'all to own your land, want to help you own it, and want to help you move it on.
Let me ask another follow-up question.
All right? You want a goat?
No, animals. Do animals transfer?
They are property.
Okay,
Cattle's property.
cattle's property.
I got 2 draft mules, 2 saddle mules, 2 horses, goats, and cows. That's all personal property of mine. It's not real estate, but it's personal property, but I own them. They will go through the will. Any other questions? What about my friends with preservation? They don't want to challenge. Thank y'all for inviting me. Good luck. Take care of your land. If you need help, call your probate judge. They'll help you. Thank you.
Great, great, great. This has been some valuable information. As we can see that land is a natural resource that if we protect it the right way, it can be of great value to us. But as we've learned so far, that it is some responsibility on the owner's part to make sure that you preserve it and protect it. So I hope we've answered your questions. For those who are attending in person, we're going to ask our presenters to hang around to answer any questions that you may have later on today. For those who are viewing virtually, if you're viewing via Facebook, then you can submit your answers in the chat box. But if you're viewing via YouTube, then I ask that you contact your local 1890 Extension office. The Low Country Region office, our phone number is area code 803-943-3538. And of course, you can visit us on the SCSU website, which is scsu.edu. Our objective for today was to answer a few questions, so we're at the midpoint, so I do want to list a few of those objectives for you. Hopefully we've addressed some of them so far, and our next presenters, which is the Centers for Heirs Property, will be addressing some more, but these are going to be some talking points for you to gauge yourself to see if we've addressed some of your concerns that you may have or you may not be aware of, or if you may want to bring some other concerns to our attention. So again, if you're viewing from home, we do want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we are addressing your concerns and your needs. But I do want you to take some time, take some notes from these 5 objectives that I want to bring to your attention if we have not addressed them so far. Number 1, first objective is to identify and recognize land-related issues having an impact on landowners. Okay? Number 2, increase awareness of resources and resource persons available to address land-related issues. 3, increase knowledge of land ownership and responsibilities, liabilities, and legal issues. 4, to better understand heirs property issues and possible heirs property resolutions. And number 5, to explore land use options for land preservation and sustainability. Those are the 5 key objectives that we purpose to address at this event today. Quite sure there's a lot of other concerns that may come up. Please bring those to our attention. Again, if you're viewing in person, our presenters will stick around. If you're viewing from home virtually, make sure you get those questions to us the best way, what is convenient for you. At this time, we're going to shift and bring forth the Center for Heirs Property. And so I'm going to bring to your front Ms. Kelsey Roberts. She's our outreach liaison, and she will introduce the staff that she has for you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Mr. Washington, for inviting the center here today. My name is Kelsey Roberts, and I am an outreach liaison with the center. I'm not originally from South Carolina. I'm originally from Ohio, but I do love South Carolina. I have an agriculture background. I grew up on a farm, so I have a really big appreciation for agriculture. But today I'm just going to give a brief synopsis on what the Center for Heirs Property does, our mission. So to start off with, the Center for Heirs Property's mission is to protect heirs' property. And we also promote the sustainable use of land to promote increased economic benefit to historically underserved landowners. And we do this through what we call our 3 buckets of work. Prevention, oh, I didn't know that was up there. Thank you. We can go, is it live? Are we able to go to the next slide? Sorry, I didn't know it was up there. One more, please. Perfect. Prevention, resolution, and land utilization. So prevention is really what we're doing here today, educating folks on the importance of having a will and letting them know that there's resources to resolve their heirs' property or prevent it in the first place. Resolution is really where our legal team comes in, helping folks resolve heirs' property if they do have that issue, helping folks draft a will. And then land utilization is where our sustainable forestry technical assistance program comes in. Oftentimes, not always, some of the folks that we help have acres of land that have forestry potential, and it's an opportunity for folks to create that generational wealth. And I always like to point out that some folks don't have a need for the land utilization piece. Some folks don't have heirs property and they do have a need for the land utilization piece, and some folks use both. So I just like to note that. We can go to the next slide, please. So a little background on the center. In 2005, the Center for Heirs Property Preservation was created. At the time, our service areas consisted of Beaufort, Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester. The South Carolina legal services lawyer and paralegal became staff at the center. Dr. Jenny Stevens, our current executive director and CEO, was loaned as our interim executive director at the time. We had a budget of $150,000 and a staff of 2 and a 5-member board. Fast forward to today, 2021, our staff has increased from 7 to 28, and our service areas have grown from 7 to 22 counties. Those include Allendale, Bamberg, Beaufort, Berkeley, Calhoun, Charleston, Clarendon, Colleton, Darlington, Dillon, Dorchester, Florence, Georgetown, Hampton, Horry, Jasper, Lee, Marion, Marlborough, Orangeburg, Sumter, and Williamsburg. And this is just a map of all the counties that I discussed. We actually just expanded into 3 new counties this year. This is a photo of pre-COVID of a seminar we were conducting. These are just a photo of some folks listening to the information that we'll be discussing a little bit today. These are some photos of our customers on the ground with our landowners, or not customers, sorry, our foresters on the ground with our landowners. So like I mentioned, the forestry program that we have is an option if you are interested in that. And this is just what it looks like to have a forester come out and look at your land with you. So impact. The center has cleared 267 titles to land with a cumulative tax assessed value of over $14.4 million. And we've had 450 forestry participants who collectively own over 30,000 acres of land, all having benefited from our forestry education and services. And I really like this slide because it just shows the need that's being met in resolving heirs property and the need that's being met in creating generational wealth as well. So that's all for me. I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Josh Walton, and he's also an attorney.
Hello, everyone. I guess I could say we're getting out of the morning, so I don't know whether I should say good morning or afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Washington, again for inviting the center. Just to give you what I want to speak to is the legal aid aspect of what the center does. I've been with the center since 2009. As Kelsey mentioned, I am an attorney. I've been practicing for 20 years. I moved to the COO position in 2019, so I carry a couple of cases now, but we have a nice group of energetic, young, justice-minded attorneys who are out there and want to serve the public in Hampton County, and these surrounding counties, as Kelsey mentioned, are in our service area. And within about a 10-minute time frame, what I want to convey to y'all is from the legal aid standpoint, why it's important, because it is a challenge. Anybody that stands up and tells you handling an heirs property case is going to be easy either hasn't done it or they're not being completely honest. It is a tough, long road to hoe, and I've handled multiple cases with the center, and those cases have come from anywhere that we call prevention versus resolution. And as we all can attest, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So as the probate judge and Ms. Saab indicated, the best way to keep from having sort of the scenario that Mr. Hamilton mentioned earlier, we see those things walk in our office every day. And that's generally, we see a lot of those cases, and we've taken on those cases and we resolve those cases, but they are difficult because you've got a lot of different folks involved and a lot of different parties, a lot of different perspectives, points of view, family members you may not have seen in 2 decades become involved. And I don't know if your family's like mine, but I know there's some that they're good up where they are. I don't need to talk about land with them. So it can be a challenge. But I will say this, just to update some of the numbers that Kelsey provided, we've actually resolved 284 tracts of land through our cases that total a tax assessed value of $16 million, and we've never been involved in a case where the family lost land. That's over a 16-year period, and there's one reason. All of our attorneys, the first and foremost is not to do harm. We want to get with the family, get with the client, and begin a process of addressing the issue. And there's a bunch of them when you're talking about heirs property, not only legal issues, but also issues that relate to family dynamic. Mediation is part and parcel. It is part of what we do, and it's part of what our attorneys expect to do. Every case I've ever resolved involves some level of family mediation and some level of family disagreement, some more than others. So please, if you're facing that sort of issue, do not let that keep you from approaching the center. You've got a white bag that Kelsey sort of passed out. It has these materials in it. These materials are, in essence, what we normally do when we give an hour and a half seminar on heirs property and the law related to it. So it is a great resource. But I will say this, the services we offer, the preventative services are just as important. We just finished a wills clinic 2 weekends ago in Orangeburg County. We have an office in Orangeburg. We have an office in Charleston. We're doing all of our intakes via phone. So you can call and you don't need to come out. You can speak, set up an appointment and speak with an attorney for free. Again, this is a legal aid organization, right? The only kind of case we won't accept is one where a client comes in and they want to force a sale. We are there to help families and clients who want to keep the land. However we get there, if we got to go through a year of mediation amongst 5 different groups of folks, we have done that and are willing to do that. So don't let that dissuade you if you feel like you've got an issue. Generally speaking, most of the legal aid involves preventative things like people come in and want a will, or their husband or wife or their parents have passed away and they need to probate the estate, as the judge was talking about. There's a 10-year period from the date someone dies that you can administer or probate their estate. In other words, create that record in the probate court of who inherited, whether that be by will or, as the judge indicated, if you don't have a will, the state of South Carolina has written a will for you, and they will decide where your property goes. It's always better for you to decide where your property goes. And we've also handled cases that a will was never done and it needs to be a probate estate handled. In other words, you go through the same probate process if there is no will, because you have to establish a record of who owns the property. The biggest problem with heirs property is there's no legal record of who owns it, right? The last person who owned it passed away, didn't have a will, their estate was never probated through the court, so their name is still on the tax bill sometimes. Estate of, heirs of, and then it might have somebody on the tax bill, care of, who they send the tax bill to. But that doesn't mean you're the sole owner because your name's on the tax bill. And I've seen a lot of our folks go through issues where people keep going back and forth, feel bad for the county administrators, keep changing the care of party name and where their property's going. So those are a lot of things that come up. And we also handle the more, I would call them difficult cases where the last owner of record was great-grandmother, great-grandfather, great-aunt, 3, 4, 5 generations of sort of that inheritance, and you might have an heir group of 70 to 100 folks. Now you can imagine how difficult that can be, particularly if the family wants to keep the land. It's real easy to go find an attorney who can bring an action on your behalf if you don't care if the land gets sold at a forced sale. If you want to protect your land, and I'm not going to get in, I don't have the time to get into the legalities associated with heirs property, but I would want you to take one thing from this. If you want to protect your land, you don't want to be in front of a judge in disagreement with other heirs. If you're in front of a judge and you're in disagreement with the other owners, you're in some form of vulnerability to losing that land. One reason the center can say we've been involved for 16 years with clients, cleared over 284 cases, and never been involved with a family losing land, is we mediate a full agreement before we even file the action. So we're not going to put you into a dangerous position in front of a judge, because once it gets in front of a judge, to a certain degree, the attorney doesn't have the power, right? The judge is following the law. And, God help you if you got 2 lawyers. The only thing worse than 1 is 2, so you got 2 in the courtroom. Well, somebody might be arguing against you and want to sell. So at the end of the day, the best policy is to prevent the problem. Have a will. If someone has passed away that you have inherited from, if it's your spouse, if it's your parents, if it's your grandparents, get in touch with an attorney about probating the estate, and there are certain follow-up actions that you can help prevent the problem from growing. And even if you're in a position to where that train is left a long time ago, right? You're down the road and you're one of 50 heirs, and it was originally owned by a great-great-grandfather. Come in. We've resolved cases to that degree. They take time, they take a lot of effort. Believe me, everybody involved has sweat equity by the time we wrap it up, but we've wrapped it up. We've had success in those instances. Oh, okay. You have a virtual question? Yes, sir.
So one of our virtual viewers asked, what is the best way to determine if your deceased grandparent have a will or deed to land assumed ownership?
Okay, so the question was, what's the best way to determine whether your loved one had a will or had a deed or assumed ownership of a piece of property, right? Well, that's going to go back to a lot of the records that Ms. Saab was talking about in the county records, right? You should be able, when you're thinking about the way land is transferred, it's either given by someone or sold by someone by way of a deed, and that deed is of record in the Register of Deeds office, right? Or someone dies owning it, and the probate court has records of where that land went after they died. If you go to the probate court, if somebody had a will, that will has to be filed with the court within 10 years from their date of death. If they die with a will, and that will is not filed with the probate court and the estate administered, it's as if they died without a will. So you should be able to go to the probate court and find a will. Now, if it's inside 10 years, maybe the will's stuck under a mattress somewhere or something, you can look there, and you might have some luck. But in that regard, and a deed is going to be available in the Register of Deeds office. So those are generally the ways you can find. Now, it's definitely a tougher route if you think, well, maybe I'm an heir to some property that someone owned, right? A great uncle or and I don't have knowledge of it. That's something that you'd have to have some information in regards to beginning the process of searching for something like that in the Register of Deeds office or the probate court. Hopefully that answered the question. And a lot of the reasons that heirs property is problematic, not only because as time passes and people pass away, right, that group only gets bigger. As people die, that group gets bigger, it gets more diverse for the purpose of their relationship to the land. A lot of my clients and a lot of the biggest issues we have are folks who are older, who lived on the land, worked the land, farmed the land, have a different sensibility, a different feeling for that land than the grandnephew who's in Philly, right? Doesn't make one right or wrong, but they're going to come to the table when we're talking about an agreement with very different perspectives, right? And that can be a challenge. And the longer you go and allow that to keep being inherited as people pass away, that group gets bigger and it becomes more difficult. So at the end of the day, when you have that issue, not only do you have that problem, you have the problem, as the judge mentioned, sometimes heirs property goes into tax sale because as the group gets bigger, people see less reason to pay those taxes because I can't do anything with the property, right? And I only own a bit, or nobody's helping me. I'm the only one paying. That's a big one that I come across, right? The other things with the hurricanes and destruction, getting repairs without being able to prove you're the owner of a home can be extremely difficult, if not possible, and people have problems with FEMA all the time and other agencies that they require proof of ownership, and depending on what their criteria is as far as ownership may be, you won't be able to present it, right? Another problem is the possibility of losing the land to a forced sale, either by way of a developer buying their way into that ownership group and forcing to sell, or another heir forcing to sell. It's not always a developer. Sometimes it's family. It's about a 50-50 as far as the cases we've seen. It's been developer, or it's been family, or it's been lost to tax sale because people just give up. And again, the longer you let it ride, the bigger that group gets and the more difficult it can become. So I know I'm over my time, and are you good? Okay, so after I speak, David Bourgeois, who's one of our staff foresters, is going to talk about the land utilization component of what we do, which is a big part. And as Kelsey mentioned, if you need the legal help, you don't need the forestry, that's fine. If you need the forestry and don't need the legal help, that's fine. If you need both, that's fine. Everybody that calls that's within South Carolina even, not even our service area, if you're within South Carolina and you want to set up an intake to talk to an attorney with the center, you can do that. Now you got to be in the county area and to get an attorney and begin work. There are a couple of criteria there. We are a legal aid agency, so there is an income guideline, but we don't require the entire family meet that. If you've got one family member who will meet that, you can get services. If land is the primary asset, you're dealing with an estate issue, whether it's a recent one and you need to go through probate court, or it's like Mr. Hamilton's, it's multiple generational, and it's going to take a little longer, you can get help as well. We actually just finished a wills clinic in Orangeburg. We offer free wills to anybody 80 or over. Just call and make an appointment with the center. Even if you're under 80, it's $50 for a will, where if you've paid for a will recently with an attorney, you'll understand that that's extremely a low price for a will. But most of and anybody that's a client gets a free will. Obviously, if you're working on their case, one of the reasons we want to give them a will is it would make no sense to resolve this big problem and then send them out the door with no will, right? We're just starting that process over potentially. Are there any, I know there's going to be a question and answer session later. Are there any, the problem with questions, sometimes legally speaking, is the devil's in the details. So I will be hanging around for a while anyway, so if you want to talk to me about some particular things, I'll be glad to answer questions and get you started on the way to contact the center. Worst thing that happen, you talk to a lawyer for an hour and a half, he or she tells you, this is what we could do, this is what you need to do. You say, okay, I might go home and think about it, or I might come back and we might see if we can get something accomplished. It's a no-lose situation. Sometimes the attorney can help a lot just by discussing what you're going through and telling you what the route's going to be out of it and what it will take. And some people immediately take advantage of it. Some people go back to their family and then come back, and sometimes they take advantage of something we call a brief service family presentation, where they're accepted, and the first thing we do is hold a family seminar where we talk about mediation and we talk about the law, so you can dispel myths that sometimes people base opinions on that might cause them to take a particular stance, but they realize actually that's not the law. So maybe I need to sit down and we can all get together. And I've had families where we start in one house, on one Saturday, and we're at another church on another Saturday, and they didn't want to be in the same room together, and we got that one resolved. So I haven't seen one, I mean, some of them have fallen apart, but some of them start like that, and we still get to the end. So that being said, oh, sure, one question?
Yeah, we have a question. So, in a situation where there is no will, but we have half of the family that wants to preserve the land and keep it in the family, and the other half wants to sell, is there a legal situation where they can come to a compromise?
Sure, the question is in the situation where there is no will, half the heirs want to sell, half the heirs want to keep. And that can happen, and that perspective I talked about plays a big role in that sometimes. It depends entirely on the circumstances of the situation. I know that sounds like a cop-out a little bit, but it does. What comes to mind is I handled a case one time where there were roughly 15 heirs, and the big disagreement was, and it's sort of similar, that one of the heirs who had passed away had sold all the timber and kept all the money, and the rest of the heirs knew that, and everybody's talking about their dad and mom. So, you know, heart's real close to this stuff, you know, and everybody remembers what the fallout from that was. And what we ended up doing was there wasn't a ton of land, but there was enough to where, because of that, everyone eventually agreed that those who were descendants of the brothers and sisters who didn't sell the timber and received the benefit of the sale got a larger tract of land. Now that came out of my mouth a lot quicker and easier than it happened in a room at a church on about 4 Saturdays in a row, but it happened. Now, in that kind of instance, for that sake, a lot of it is going to depend on what folks want. I think it's something like that. We'd want a brief service family presentation or a family presentation. Talk to them about what the law says, look at the land, start the discussion of what can happen other than gridlock, right? Because nobody's going to benefit from that. And I will say this, in that situation, we've had people who want to sell, so we're going to go hire an attorney, which they can do, and they can bring an action to force a partition sale. But you know who's going to make money in that? Exactly, the lawyers, right? The lawyers, one at least, probably more than one, because once that gets rolling, they're going to go hire another attorney, right? And at the end of the day, it'll be a forced sale, and the attorneys and the associated folks who are providing those services are going to reap the benefit of that sale, and you've got a fractured family, and even the folks who don't want to sell are going to get their share. So that money is going to everybody. So even the people who wanted to force a sale are going to walk away with, in most cases, very little money, unless we're talking about waterfront property that's worth, you know, a couple of $1 million. Yes, sir. Great question. The question was, can a partition sale, a forced partition sale, happen only in heirs property, or can it happen in other circumstances? The forced partition sale can happen anytime you have more than one owner. If me and Mr. Washington bought land together, and it came a time where we were in disagreement, and one of us wanted to sue the other one for a partition sale, we could. It's not heirs property, it's just two people owning land together and what the associated rights are when that happens. It just so happens in heirs property, you got a big group of people in that same legal set of circumstances, and the same rights are available to them as they would be if it was just me and Mr. Washington. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to David Bourgeois because I've eaten a lot of time up. So, but I'll be around if I can answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see people here in person. We've been doing seminars and such in the Zoom fashion for the last year or so. As you well know, it's great to see people there. So I don't have to tell you to unmute yourself. Anybody who has a question, just pull your mask down and you go for it, and I'll be trying to answer it. And you don't have to do it in the chat box. You don't have to worry about any of that. My name is David Bourgeois. I've been with the Center for Heirs Property Preservation for just about 4 years. Prior to that, I worked in forest industry for 37 years for Westvaco, Mid-Westvaco, West Rock. It was all the same land, but they kept trading the land. Sorry about that. They kept trading the land over. I worked for one company that kept moving land, and eventually, they've sold that off to other people. So I have a long history in forestry. I worked in forest research for a long time. A lot of that time, some of it was in ecosystem research, and I learned a lot about it. I'm very interested and in love with the land of the coastal plain of South Carolina. I've studied tree spacing, tree genetics, all the ways that we can grow trees on this beautiful land that we have here. I'm going to circle back to the first topic that was discussed, dramatic loss of land ownership among African Americans. Nobody, I heard, put the numbers to that, but what we've been told is in the last 100 years, that number has gone from something like 15 million acres of land ownership down to about 2.4 or something in that neighborhood. The bottom line is that there's a fraction of land ownership, and why does that matter? Land is real property. It's not like it's an appreciating asset, unlike a car that's a depreciating asset. I got a car in the 1980s and might have paid $7,500 for it. 15 years later, I got $800 for it, so it's been decades that car has been absolutely worthless, and if I had spent that money on land at that time, that would probably have doubled, tripled, or more. And that's just the basic bare land value. So it's a very important thing to, if you own land, you are a very lucky person. Do not let that land go. Do not let it become heirs property. Keep control of that land the best you can. That's one of the most important things you can do. And it's not just for you, but for the next generation and the next generation after that. The demographic that I work with, the people who I serve, are nearly all 50 and above. I'd say that more than half of them are female. And I'd say that more than half of them worry about what will happen to this land when I'm gone. Will my kids just sell it off because they don't see the value in it? So one of my jobs, one of my biggest jobs is educating people about their land, about the value of their land, and trying to impress on them. And many of them know that, but impress on them and help them impress on the next generation. Why is it important for us to keep this land and to make it more valuable than it was for the generation before? So I'm going to go through a little scenario that I do with folks. What is the value of your land? A lot of people think, well, yeah, my grandfather, he cut some trees off the land, and then my dad cut some trees off the land, and someday I will cut some trees off the land. When you do that, you can expect to get, studies out of Clemson have shown that you can expect to get about $1,000 per acre for your trees after about 30 years. So if we just do the basic math on that, divide $1,000 by 30 years, my land might be worth $33 per acre per year just to own that land minus whatever I paid in taxes on it. So what I suggest to people is if you are purposefully growing trees, if you plant trees, the right spacing, good genetics, with the proper practices to, like you would with a corn crop or a soybean crop. You can do the same thing with trees. There's 50 years of research that allows people to do this, and if you drive around the roads of Hampton County or any county around here, you'll see log trucks and you'll see trees planted in nice straight lines. If you do that, after about 15 years, you can expect to do a thinning on those trees. You cut about half of the trees. You planted, say, 620 trees per acre, come in at age 15, cut about half of those, and what you're doing is releasing the larger, straighter, more valuable sawtimber trees. You're cutting out the pulpwood trees, the ones that are going to be chipped up and made into paper products. And you can expect to get $500 or $800 per acre for your thinning. And so if you take we'll use the low number conservatively and say, I made $500 an acre for thinning. Divide that by the 15 years that you waited. Coincidentally, that's $33 per acre per year. It was worth about the same amount. However, going forward, you can expect to clear cut your timber at probably age 22, 23. So let's say 8 years later, you clear cut your saw timber trees, the high value product, and you should get about $2,500 to $3,000 an acre for those. You only waited 8 more years to get it. Let's use the low number, divide $2,500 per acre by the 8 years that you waited. Your land at that time was worth about $312 per acre per year that you held that minus the taxes. So the idea I'm trying to impress on you is you can make your land worth a lot more if you have forest land. All those major companies like the one that I work for, about 100 years ago, they came in here in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and they bought up this land to plant trees. They had come to the end of cut out and get out harvesting, and walking away and we're never gonna come back, to realize we gotta grow trees on this land. And they came here because the Coastal Plain of South Carolina is a subtropical climate, has some of the best tree-growing soils in the country, maybe in the world. And so if you look at a band of land that's owned by industrial forest landowners, that's still being, even though the company I work for no longer holds that land, TMOs and REITs own that land. They manage it intensively. They put some money on the front end and get a lot more on the back end than an average person who just lets it. As I tell people, any acre in South Carolina will grow up to be something, but if half of your land is taken up by shrubs and vines and bushes or trees that are unmerchantable, the wrong species, the wrong spacing, it will be worth far less to you. It will someday pay some money to your family. The other thing I point out to people is having land growing trees, timber as a way to make money for a family. It's not like you're winning the lottery and you're going to quit your job. But think about this, and this is the way I explain to folks who I work with, have 20, 30 acres of land, and they someday have this infusion of, say $40,000 or $80,000, pay off their house, help child, grandchild get an education without being saddled with debt after they come out of school. That next generation is then able to start paying for their retirement, start paying for their children, start being able to do more and live a better life. Everybody I talk to just wants it to be a little better for their children and for the next generation. And if you have a piece of land, and then also if you impress on your children and grandchildren the importance of owning and keeping that land, it will certainly help your family in the long term. They say that forest industry, they say it's true, is a $21 billion industry in South Carolina. And we have one of your handout sheets. I'm going to refer to some of these sheets. Since I'm just talking off the cuff, I'm not going to go through my normal spiel. But I often like to tell people, you say, well, yeah, 21 billion, so what's that? Well, let's do a little mental exercise. If you went on to Amazon today, get home on your computer, and you started spending $1,000 an hour, and you did that all tonight and all tomorrow night and all the next night, and you kept doing that 24 hours a day, how long do you think it would take you to go through $1 billion? Because people don't have a concept of what $1 billion is. I know I didn't until I did this. Anybody have an idea? Anybody who's not doing it on the calculator? I'm going to save you some time. Okay, so if you did that, it would take you about 114 years to go through $1 billion. That is a lot of money, even by my standards. But the big deal here is this is money that stays in our community. This is money it goes to loggers, it goes to truck drivers, it goes to wood processing facilities. This is money that's then circulated. It goes to people paying taxes. It goes to you, the person who receives some money for your timber, and then the money that you spend, whether you're buying a house or building something or helping your kids through college. But this money, it's not like sending it to Walmart or some other country. And at the same time that you're doing this, you're keeping your land in trees, which is something that can be done repeatedly for the next generation, Another thing I point out to people is you're also improving the planet. Trees are sequestering carbon. Trees are producing oxygen, taking carbon dioxide. People say, well, there's, the carbon dioxide is, did I cause that? The carbon dioxide is increasing in our atmosphere. Well, loblolly pine trees are sequestering carbon dioxide. So, you got some friend and he says, yeah, I bought a Prius or I got an electric vehicle. You can say, well, you can't outwalk me because I got trees and I'm sequestering carbon. And believe it or not, there is now going to be, starting this year, there is a way to earn money by sequestering carbon with your trees. This is another thing I tell people is, you might have heard people talk about the phrase that the jobs that your children will do have not been invented yet. Well, really the same can be said, I believe, about land ownership and ways that you can earn money from your property. 2 or 5 years ago, people wouldn't have thought of being able to sell carbon credits for not harvesting timber. There's a company called Sylvia Terra, you can look them up on the web, that is now paying people in South Carolina. They started last year in some other states, and now they've moved to some of the southern states, including South Carolina. And if you have stand of pine trees, they will use remote sensing aerophotography to determine, and they have to be merchantable trees, and so that what you're saying is, I could cut these trees, people are harvesting around me and they're making money with trees. I choose not to. I have a 1-year contract with you, and you will sell your carbon credits. Companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon are putting up money to sequester carbon, and then through this, what they call a carbon exchange, they will tell you, okay, on your land, looking at the aerophotography, you have a parcel of 15, 20 acres, whatever it is, of pine trees growing. They're merchantable, and they'll say, you're sequestering, however many tons of carbon per acre. How much will you sell each of your carbon credits for? And you put a number out there, and it can be something like $15 or $20 per acre that they will pay you for a 1-year contract. So if you want to conserve your land and you didn't intend to cut anyway, or you don't plan on cutting for a while, you want to enjoy your older timber, that's a way to make money that did not exist 5 years ago. That was something that if you had 5,000 acres or 10,000 acres and said, I want to put it in an easement and tie it up for the next 100 years, someone might pay you to do that. But now it's available to people who have 50 acres, 20 acres, 12 acres. Another thing that didn't used to exist, there's I'm sure most of you are familiar with Airbnb, where you lease out your house for the weekend or whatever. Well, there's a thing called Hip Camp. Look it up. People might pay you money, and I believe that this is something that will get bigger and bigger. A lot of people live in the cities. They don't live in rural Hampton, South Carolina, and they're willing to pay money to be out in nature. You might have a nice little pond in your land or some secluded spot that with a trail, and someone might pay you, say, I want to be able to use your land for a week, and they go to Hip Camp and they sign up, and that's kind of a clearinghouse like Airbnb is. Point I'm making, I'm not saying you should do this with your land, the point I'm making is that there are opportunities out there that did not exist 5 or 10 years ago, and who knows what will happen 25 years from now. All right, so how do I actually help you? If you contact the center and want help with your forest land, we don't charge anything. We ask you to fill out what's called an interest sheet, and on this interest sheet it has things like your name, how many acres you have, where your land is, what the TMS numbers are, the tax map numbers, and what that allows me to do is figure out where your land is. Once you turn this in, I will arrange with you, I will probably email you some maps and background information that I can find about your land. Before I ever meet someone, every piece of land I've ever been on in South Carolina has been different. Every family situation has been different. What people want to do with their land is different because people are different. But basically you are telling me where your land is, showing that either it's heirs property, not heirs property, owned by several people, one person, and all those things are important when we talk about what you might be able to do with your land. So what I will do is I will go and look at aerial photography, historical aerial photography. I will look at soils data, make up soils and drainage maps, and determine, what are the best places to grow trees. Or a lot of times, if you have agricultural land, good ag land, I'm not going to tell you to grow trees there, but the highest and best use is likely agriculture. But I would come out there and I'm not an ag guy, but I can connect you with people who could help you, whether you have livestock crops. I would connect you with people at the Natural Resource Conservation Service and RCS. Many of you are probably familiar with them. But I would try to help you with your land in any way that I can. Things that we've done, this was mentioned earlier about, are you paying the right taxes? I've worked with people, met a lady in Berkeley County a couple of years ago, and walked her property. She had 2 or 3 different tracts, 12, 15 acres, 22 acres, and she was telling me about what her taxes were and how the taxes were killing her. And I asked about how much she was paying, and when she told me, I said, that's not right. That's not, this is ag land. This is, clearly forest land. There's no, that's, somebody's paying her, and she looked back and found out she was paying residential rates. Same thing happened to a guy I worked with bottom line is I found her the paperwork to send in to the assessor of Berkeley County, and the next year she sent me an email and said, hey, you won't believe it, I'm paying $1,200 less in my taxes this year than I was last year. And it's great thing, and it's going forward. That's $1,200, and, you know, not gonna make her rich, but that's money she can be putting into her things instead of somebody else's things. Guy in Carlton County came to us, and same deal. He was paying what seemed like an exorbitant amount of taxes on his land. Well, come to find out, he lived on 22 acres. An acre of that was cleared where he was living. He was paying residential rates on the whole thing, and just didn't know that. Let's see, we talked about jobs, so that we partner with a lot of different organizations. I mentioned the Natural Resource Conservation Service, South Carolina Forestry Commission I didn't mention, we work with them, Clemson, ArborGen, Ag South. One of our most important partners, and one of the most important ways that I can help folks is if you have land that has been harvested, cut over, and you want to replant it. We will help you do that by connecting you with Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have, in your packet, you'll see this thing, 5 steps to assistance. If you have land's been cut over, the NRCS considers that to be degraded land. And what I can do is help you through the process of getting that land replanted, not only getting it replanted, but getting it replanted with the right number of trees, the good genetics that I talked about to make your land worth likely 3 to 5 times what it would be worth if you just let it grow back naturally. The South Carolina Forestry Commission has a program where they will cost share payments of about up to 40% of the cost of replanting your land. The program with the Natural Resource Conservation Service is much more generous. It's about 90%. And so what does this mean? It's if you apply to, say you had 20 acres and you apply to get that land replanted, we'll go out and look at your property, fill out an application, and make recommendations of what would be needed to replant this land. And there's a million variables about how wet it is, how dry it is, how grown up it is, how many years it's been since it's been harvested. But we'll send this application in, and the NRCS batches those applications. They will not even, like if you applied today, fill out an application today in Hampton County, all of the applications will be held until usually November is their deadline. So next winter is when they would actually come back to you and say, yes, you've been approved, or no, you haven't been approved, and they would also say, you've been approved for these practices, let's say shearing, that's a way of clearing the land, a mechanical practice. We're gonna pay you $170 per acre to do shearing on your 22 acres. We're gonna pay you $70 an acre to do a chemical treatment to kill the weeds and the competing hardwoods on your 20 acres. And then we're gonna pay you $170 an acre to plant loblolly pine trees or longleaf pine trees or whatever it is that you're planting, depending on what your land is and what would be the best thing to plant there and to meet your goals. So it is a long-term process. It's an incredible deal. Let's go back to the example of having 20 acres. If you have our experience with the landowners who I've worked with in the last 4 years, if you had 20 acres of land that was cut over and you're trying to replant it, you would probably have to pay out of pocket about $800 to $1,200. The NRCS, you would be leveraging about $7,000 to $8,000 of NRCS funding, and you would be making your land worth, as I said, 3 to 5 times more you could expect on that 20 acres. You can expect to cut $40,000 to $60,000 of timber value. So if you're willing to invest a little bit on the front, and if you have harvested timber, you know, you probably want to hold out a little bit of that money in anticipation of replanting the next stand and make it worth more. So oftentimes people come to me and they don't have harvested timber, but they say, well, I've got land and we want to cut the trees, but we don't know what they're worth, and we've had people calling us up. I had a lady just last week who said, you know, these people keep calling me and they wanted, you know, somebody wanted to give me $16,000, and I went out there and I looked at her trees and I said, you know, I can't tell her they're worth exactly X or Y, but I can definitely tell her that you need to get some more bids because there's far more value here than that. And there's a lot of things that people don't understand if you don't buy and sell timber every day. The prices change all the time, the circumstances change, but here's an example that the average person wouldn't be ready for. We had a fellow in Williamsburg County. He called us up and he said, hey, I signed a contract to cut my trees, and they were supposed to send me a payment, and I didn't get my payment. And I said, well, can you send me a copy of the contract? And I looked at the contract, he sent it to me, and the contract was telling him that, oh, you're gonna make, $20 a ton for pine saw timber. And I said, that's pretty good. They haven't paid him anything yet, but that sounds pretty good. And I looked at where his land was, and I went up to his land and actually on the ground walked the property. There was really no flagging on the boundaries or anything like that. But went up and looked at it, and then I saw on the thing, well, they're gonna pay him so much per board foot for timber. And I said, well, that's not right, because people sell timber around here by the ton, not by the board foot. You can convert it, but that's a way of confusing people. And then they said, well, we're gonna give him like $2.50 a ton for hardwood pulp. And at the time, hardwood pulp was going for $8 a ton. Well, the trick there was that all of this man had on his land was 90% of it was hardwood pulp. There was no pine saw timber. So, oh, it's a great deal, or we're paying you what the market is for pine saw timber. You have no pine saw timber. Thankfully, the contractor had not moved any. They hadn't paid him one. They hadn't moved any equipment to his land two. So he has a signed contract. That's a valid. If that guy had moved in and cut that, they both agreed on it. He signed it with his own name. However, he was able to send them a certified letter and say, I've received no payment, you've not moved any equipment, and this contract is no longer valid. But bottom line is, you need to know what your timber is worth before you try to sell it. The best way to sell timber is to actually have a forester working for you, marketing it, bidding it out in what's called a sealed bid, where nobody knows what the other person is paying, and that way you're going to get the closest you can to market value. And you might say, well, the way it works when a forester markets your timber is that he takes 5–10% of the proceeds as they come out. You don't pay him up front, but as timber goes to the mill each week, you get a check, and he gets a percentage of that. And you might think, that sounds like a lot, I can do it myself. Well, you could, but you're taking on a lot more risk, because that forester knows the markets better. He's going to be there to monitor the timber sale. He's going to be watching the trucks leave your property and making sure that the saw timber $20 a ton product is not going on the pulpwood trucks, the $10 a ton product. He's going to mark out your boundary lines, make sure that the logger doesn't cut on somebody else's land, and then all of a sudden, he's charging you 3 times the value of the timber was cut. He's going to make sure that the contract insists that the roads on your property are left as good or better than they were when he started. There's all kinds of things that, like I said, that you would not know that he could help you with. That's the best way to sell timber. The next way would be, if you don't have enough timber value that a forester would be willing to do that, we can give you names of people we know to be reputable timber buyers, and you can go to several different timber buyers on your own. We suggest more than several, and here's why. We've had people who said, well, this timber buyer called me, and he's going to give me $15,000 for my trees, and I didn't know what they're worth. And a week later, this other guy called me. He was going to give me $18,000 for my trees. You don't know; those guys might be working in the same office. You just don't know. Maybe they're not. Maybe those are valid numbers, but I've seen timber bidded out on a 40-acre tract where the difference between the lowest and the highest bid was from $30,000 to $70,000, the same exact wood. I mean, and if you don't know what you don't know. But, so what we're trying to do is impress on folks the value of their land. As I said, I've been here for about 4 years, and before coming here, coming from an intensive forestry background, I have yet to go to a piece of land where someone was managing their land intensively. So I see this huge opportunity. It's the same soil, it's the same land. Many times in the recent past over in Colton County, I've been going to a landowner and looking for their boundaries and then all of a sudden say, hey, there's an old West Vaco sign. They're using the same land that the big companies are, but they're just not taking the most advantage of it. And we can help you do that. We want to help you do that because I want you to be able to keep the land in your family so the next generation can enjoy that land. I'm going to end with this, that I'm hoping that someone here, I know that I came here for a reason today, that someone in here owns land, or if they don't, they know someone who owns land whom I can help, whom the center can help. I think Josh mentioned that they have free wills clinics. They can help you with a will. But if you have any forest land or you know someone who has forest land that they have cut their trees and want to, even if they don't want them to get replanted, I would love to talk them into that. Question?
Yes, sir. You mentioned carbon sequestration.
Yes.
So in South Carolina, you said there's a company that is actually buying carbon credits right now?
Yes, Sylvia Terra. And there are more, I believe, that will be following. And the first iteration, they're specifically focused on pine stands, predominantly pine stands. But I'm told that they will be offering the same thing for hardwood stands probably by the end of the year, or if not, the next iteration in next year. And I'd be happy to give you the information on that. But go ahead.
Yeah, so also, isn't farmland included in some, I know some companies outside of South Carolina have been buying carbon credits for farmers. And also talking about how they keep the soil enriched with carbon and things of that nature, or what they're using in best farming practices. So if we lease land to someone, or if you're a landowner, you lease land to someone, does the landowner get those credits, or how does that work? Are they shared?
That is not something that I can answer. One, I'm only, there probably are agricultural credits for that. I'm not aware of that. This, as I said, this forestry credits for not harvesting your trees. Brand new to me. 1-year contract that you signed, and you can, I guess, repeat that. But as far as the credits for ag land, I'm not familiar with that. I don't doubt that that exists, but and I think that there's going to be a lot more of that in the not too distant future, because this company, Sylvia Terra, the first one over here, there are other companies that are already talking about doing that. I think they all get, someone makes money on it, and these large companies are putting probably millions, if not billions of dollars out there to sequester carbon and improve the planet. So I think that there's going to be more of that coming. One thing I didn't mention, another opportunity would be this, okay, I did mention HipCamp. Oh, biggest thing I can do for you is help with, if you want to replant trees or you haven't cut your trees yet, the best time to replant is as soon as you can after you've cut your timber. There's an old forestry adage. I mean, a lot of times people say, well, I've been wanting to do something with the land, but we never did anything, didn't know what to do. There's an old forestry adage, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. So I'm challenging all of you, or any of you who have land, come to us. We'd love to help you, and if we do these seminars online, check with the center. If you get your name, if you fill out one of these interest forms, you'll be on our mailing list. You'll know, you don't even have to show up. You can do it at home in your computer and learn a lot more about forestry and more about Heirs Property. And I really thank you very much for your time today. It's great to see people in person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, Ms. Kelsey, our attorney. We thank you for the valuable information, and we understand that we shared a lot of information today. It's a lot to digest. We do have some printed information for our virtual viewers that we will be sending to you if you registered. If you did not register, we will leave our social media platforms open for a few minutes. We will need you to send us your contact information. Preferably email, mailing address, phone number, so we can contact you, and that will be your official request to get the printed information from the legal services, Centers for Heirs Property, SC State University, 1890 Research and Extension, as well as our county governments. We will get that information to you. This concludes our virtual portion of the presentation. Again, we thank you for joining us today. We hope that we were able to address some of your needs. But like I said, at South Carolina State University Research and Extension, we're committed to addressing the issues and the needs that are pressing to you. So please contact us with any needs, any concerns, any requests for services that we may can provide for you. Our website is scsu.edu. We're on all the social media platforms. We thank you for attending. Again, send us your contact information if you have any requests for some of the printed material that we have shared with you on today. Thank you. As far as our individuals that are attending in person, we're going to take a 10-minute break to do restrooms. Our restrooms are to the back. We're going to have lunch in about another 10 or 15 minutes, and then we will conclude with question and answer sessions. Before we go into that, do we have any questions or comments for the good of all? If anyone want to have any experiences that they would like to share in regards of Heirs Property, I know I've heard some stories just talking in the front end about some, I don't want to say horror stories, but let's just say some situations where we have some work to do in the area of Heirs Property. As we can see, there's a lot of legalities involved, there's a lot of responsibility, there's a lot of meetings that need to come together with our family members. Okay, so the question we asked about the family on one side, some want to sell, some want to keep. Y'all know we're gonna have some family members that want to preserve the land and keep it in the family, and we have the other family member that sees dollar signs, and so now we got to come to a compromise. Okay, if your family is anything like mine, then we've all had those situations. I've shared a situation where he mentioned about on a grocery bag. I currently have a situation in my family where we went to begin the process to resolve the heirs property. And in the courthouse today, there is sort of a will written by my great-grandfather on a grocery bag. And it just has his name, his sibling's name, and it's dated. And they still have it as official document today. So we're trying to work that out. So again, we're going to take a brief break, 5 to 10 minutes, get up, stretch, use the restroom. We have some water, share contact information. We ask that you do continue to wear your mask, and we will convene in about 10 minutes. Thank you.